We need to talk about the overtime reports, Chief. I file those every week. Nothing that you knew there.
Fire Chief Lucius Corbin was arrested that day, charged with setting 11 forest fires across the county to inflate his department's overtime budget. Within 18 hours, investigators would trace the pattern of how each fire started to a single device, and that device was registered in his name. By the time the fires were put out, 3 homes were gone completely. One firefighter, a man who had worked under Corbin for years, was hurt while battling a blaze his own chief had lit. A fire chief leads a county fire department. He trains the crews, manages the budget, and makes the call when lives are on the line. The whole system runs on one simple idea, that the person leading the fight against fire would never become its cause. The badge was supposed to mean the opposite of what it became. For years, people trusted Lucius Corbin with their safety. Neighbors waved at him. Firefighters followed his orders without question. No one looked twice at his paperwork, because why would they? So here's the question. If you lived in this county, would you have noticed anything wrong? Would the signs have stood out to you? Or would Corbin's uniform and reputation have been enough to keep you from asking questions? Stick around, because what comes next shows exactly how a man trusted to protect people slowly became the danger they needed protecting from. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss how this story unfolds. Lucius Corbin grew up in a small house on a quiet street, raised by his mother after his father left when he was young. Money was tight, but his mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and the lights on. Lucius learned early that nothing in life came easy. One night, when he was 9 years old, Lucius woke up to shouting outside his window. The house 2 doors down was on fire. He stood on the porch in his pajamas, watching orange flames climb into the night sky. Neighbors ran around in panic, screaming for help. Then the fire trucks arrived. Men in heavy coats jumped out, moving fast, shouting orders, pulling hoses toward the burning house. Lucius couldn't take his eyes off them. While everyone else stood frozen, scared, and helpless, these men knew exactly what to do. They walked straight into danger like it was nothing. To a 9-year-old boy who felt small and powerless most of the time, they looked like giants. After that night, Lucius couldn't stop thinking about it. He would lie awake imagining what it must feel like to walk into a burning building and walk out a hero. He pictured himself in the heavy coat, the helmet, the boots, being the one people looked to when everything was falling apart. At school, Lucius was quiet. He didn't have the newest shoes or the coolest clothes. Sometimes other kids made fun of him for it. But he noticed something. When the firefighters walked through the neighborhood, nobody made fun of them. People respected them. People needed them. That respect was something Lucius wanted badly. Not just to be liked, but to matter. To be the kind of person whose presence meant something was about to get fixed, not get worse. By the time he was a teenager, Lucius had made up his mind. He was going to become a firefighter. Not because he loved the idea of danger, and not because he dreamed of power over others. It was simpler than that. He never wanted to feel the way he felt that night on the porch again. Small, scared, and unable to do anything but watch. For Lucius Corbin, becoming a firefighter wasn't about chasing glory. It was about making sure he would never again be the helpless kid standing on the porch, watching the world burn without him. At 19, Lucius Corbin signed up for the County Fire Academy. He was younger than most of the other recruits, but he didn't let that stop him. While others complained about the long hours and hard training, Lucius showed up early and stayed late. He passed his certification exams on the first try, something not everyone could say. His first job was as a firefighter at a small station on the edge of town. He worked nights, weekends, and holidays without complaint. Within 3 years, he was promoted to senior firefighter. 5 years after that, he became a lieutenant. People noticed how calm he stayed during emergencies. While other firefighters sometimes froze or panicked during big fires, Lucius stayed focused. One performance review from his early years as a lieutenant described him this way. Corbin remains composed under extreme pressure, often becoming the steady voice his team relies on during chaotic scenes. That kind of reputation doesn't happen by accident. Lucius studied fire patterns. He learned how buildings collapsed, how smoke moved, and how to make fast decisions when seconds mattered. He took extra training courses on his own time, even when he didn't have to. By his early 30s, Lucius was a captain, leading his own crew. He trained new recruits the same way he had been trained, tough, but fair. Many of the younger firefighters looked up to him. He had a reputation for never asking his team to do something he wouldn't do himself. Over the next several years, Lucius continued to move up. He became a battalion chief, overseeing multiple stations and larger emergency operations. His name became known throughout the county fire department as someone who could be trusted to handle pressure without losing control. Then, after 15 years with the department, it happened. At age 41, Lucius Corbin was officially promoted to fire chief of the county fire department. His new salary was listed at $118,000 a year, a long way from the modest paycheck he earned as a young recruit. For a kid who once stood on a porch watching firefighters work, unable to do anything but watch, this was everything he had worked for. He was no longer the helpless one. He was the man other people looked to when things went wrong. By every measure, Lucius Corbin had earned his place. He was respected, experienced, and trusted with one of the most important jobs in the county. Nobody who knew his story would have guessed what was coming next. On the evening of March 14th, 2 years before his arrest, Lucius Corbin drove out to a quiet stretch of land on the edge of the county. It was the kind of spot most people forgot about, a patch of dry brush near an old service road, far from houses, far from traffic, far from anyone who might be watching. He parked his truck, walked a short distance into the brush, and lit a small fire. It wasn't a big fire. It didn't need to be. Lucius knew exactly how dry brush behaved this time of year, and he knew exactly how long it would take for someone to spot the smoke and call it in. When the call came through, Lucius responded with his crew, just like he always did. They put the fire out within an hour. No injuries. No property damage. Just a small brush fire, the kind that happens a dozen times a season. But that night, something else happened. Lucius filed the incident report himself. And in that report, he listed extra hours. Hours for himself and a few select members of his crew. Hours that didn't quite match the time the fire actually took to put out. It wasn't a huge amount of money. Just a little extra, tucked into the system, easy to overlook. Lucius waited. He watched the next few paychecks closely, checking to see if anyone in the finance department would ask questions. Days passed. Then weeks. Nothing happened. The extra hours were approved, processed, and paid out, just like every other report he had ever filed. For a man who had spent 15 years following every rule, studying every procedure, and earning every promotion the right way, this was something new. This wasn't about training or skill. This was a test. A quiet, simple question Lucius asked the system without anyone knowing he was asking it. Would anyone check? The answer came back clear. No. No one in the finance office flagged the report. No one on his crew questioned their paychecks. No one above him reviewed the numbers closely enough to notice anything out of place. The system trusted him completely, just like it always had. Lucius Corbin had just set his first fire, collected extra pay for it, and walked away without a single question asked. No one noticed. After that first fire went unnoticed, something in Lucius Corbin changed. The test had worked. No one had questioned him. And over the next 2 years, what started as one quiet decision slowly grew into something much bigger. The fires didn't happen often. Lucius was too careful for that. But they always seemed to come near the end of the department's budget cycle, when extra overtime hours could be explained as seasonal demand or unexpected emergencies. Each fire was a little bigger than the one before. Each one brought in a little more extra pay. But fires don't stay small forever. And fires don't care who gets hurt. One fire spread faster than expected, moving toward a quiet neighborhood at the edge of town. By the time it was put out, a retired schoolteacher had lost the home she had lived in for 30 years. She had raised her children there, retired there, and planned to spend the rest of her life there. Months later, another fire forced a family of 4 out of their house for nearly half a year while repairs were made. 2 parents and 2 young kids spent that time living in a relative's spare bedroom, waiting to go home. Then there was the volunteer firefighter. He was young, eager to help his community, and proud to wear the uniform. During one of the bigger fires, he was caught in heavy smoke for too long. He survived, but his lungs were damaged. Doctors said it could take years before he felt normal again, if he ever did. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. But out of everyone affected, one story hit harder than the rest. The retired teacher didn't just lose a house. Inside that house were boxes filled with photographs. Pictures of her late husband, her children when they were babies, and old classroom photos with students she had taught over 25 years. There were also keepsakes passed down from her own mother, things that couldn't be bought again at any store. When investigators spoke to her afterward, she didn't talk much about the house itself. She talked about the photographs. Those memories, she said, were the one thing she could never get back, no matter how much money the county gave her. The first crack in Lucius Corbin's plan didn't come from the fire department at all. It came from an insurance auditor working a routine review of claims filed across the county over the past 2 years. While going through the numbers, the auditor noticed something strange. Every time a wildfire claim came in from a certain part of the county, overtime hours for the fire department spiked in that same area, almost like clockwork. At first, it seemed like a coincidence. Fires mean overtime, that made sense. But the pattern was too clean, too consistent. The auditor flagged it and passed the information along to investigators. That single flag was enough to start a quiet, careful investigation. Forensic analysts began testing samples taken from the burn sites of several fires over the past 2 years. Most people wouldn't think twice about ash and burned soil, but to trained experts, it tells a story. The analysts found traces of accelerant, a substance used to help fires start and spread quickly. More importantly, the chemical pattern in the residue matched a specific type of ignition device, one not commonly used by the public. That detail narrowed things down fast. Investigators then requested GPS records from every department vehicle assigned to the affected stations. At first, it was just routine. But when they lined up the locations of each fire with the GPS data, something jumped out immediately. One vehicle had been near the origin point of every single fire. And not just near, but there before any dispatch call went out reporting smoke or flames. That vehicle belonged to Fire Chief Lucius Corbin. Investigators double-checked the timestamps. They cross-referenced them with his personal schedule, his reported activities, and the official incident reports he had filed himself. Every time, the pattern matched. Corbin's vehicle was at each location minutes, sometimes longer, before anyone else even knew there was a fire. At this point, investigators knew they weren't looking at bad luck or coincidence anymore. They were looking at a pattern that pointed directly at one man, the same man trusted to lead the response to every one of these fires. The next step would require absolute certainty before anyone made a move. But for the first time in 2 years, the system built to protect this county was finally starting to ask the right questions. The morning of the arrest started like any other. Lucius Corbin pulled into the lot near his fire station, parked his department truck, and stepped out, ready for another day. He didn't notice the 2 unmarked cars waiting nearby until it was too late. 2 investigators approached him calmly. One of them asked if he had a few minutes to talk. Lucius, still composed, said sure, figuring it was just another routine check. "We've been looking at GPS data from your vehicle," one investigator said. "We need you to walk us through a few locations." Lucius shrugged. "I go a lot of places. That's the job." The investigator pulled out a tablet and turned it toward him. On the screen was a map, with red dots marking each fire from the past 2 years. Next to each dot was a timestamp, and a second timestamp showing exactly when Corbin's vehicle had arrived at that location, minutes before any call came in. "Can you explain this?" the investigator asked. For the first time, Lucius hesitated. "I sometimes patrol those areas, checking conditions. Every single time, before the fire started." Lucius opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His hands, usually so steady, started to shake slightly. The calm expression he had worn for 15 years began to slip. "Lucius Corbin, you're under arrest for arson and fraud," the investigator said, pulling out handcuffs. By now, other firefighters had stepped outside, drawn by the unusual scene. They watched in silence as their chief, the man who trained them, who stayed calm during every emergency, stood frozen while the cuffs were placed on his wrists. "This is a mistake," Lucius said quietly, but no one responded. He was walked across the lot, past the same fire engine he had commanded for years, the one with his name still listed on the roster taped inside the cab. Firefighters who had once respected him stood and watched, some shaking their heads, others just staring in disbelief. As he was placed into the back of the patrol car, one investigator went back to his truck to collect his belongings. Sitting on the dashboard, untouched, was his chief's helmet, the same helmet he had worn at every fire, every emergency, every moment that had built his reputation. It stayed there on the dashboard, exactly where he had left it, as the patrol car pulled away. The trial of Lucius Corbin drew attention from across the county. People who once trusted him as their fire chief now filled the courtroom benches, waiting to hear how a man sworn to protect them had instead put their homes and lives at risk. Prosecutors laid out the case piece by piece. Corbin was charged with multiple counts of arson, fraud, and insurance violations. The evidence was overwhelming. The GPS records, the matching accelerant residue, and the overtime reports he had filed himself, all lined up like a trail leading straight back to him. But the most powerful moment of the trial wasn't the evidence. It was the testimony. The retired schoolteacher, the woman who had lost her home of 30 years, took the stand. She spoke calmly, but her voice shook when she described walking through the ashes of her home, searching for anything that survived. She talked about the photographs of her late husband, her children, and her former students, all of it gone. She told the court that money could rebuild a house, but it couldn't bring back those memories. When it was time for sentencing, the judge addressed the courtroom directly. He spoke about trust, how the community had placed their safety in Corbin's hands, believing he would protect them no matter what. He said Corbin hadn't just broken the law. He had betrayed the very promise that came with his badge and uniform. "You took an oath to protect lives," the judge said, "and instead, you endangered them for personal gain. The damage you caused goes far beyond money. You put innocent people in danger, destroyed homes, and harmed a man who only wanted to serve his community." The judge sentenced Lucius Corbin to 12 years in prison. In addition, he was ordered to pay restitution to the victims, covering the costs of their lost homes, displacement, and medical expenses for the injured volunteer firefighter. As part of the sentencing, Corbin's firefighting certification was permanently revoked. The man who had spent 15 years climbing through the ranks, earning respect and responsibility, would never again be allowed to wear the uniform he once worked so hard to earn. Today, Lucius Corbin remains incarcerated, serving out his sentence in a state correctional facility, far away from the community he once swore to protect. In the months after Lucius Corbin was sentenced, the county fire department made big changes. New rules were put in place for overtime claims, requiring more than one person to approve any extra hours before payment was made. Fire investigations also changed. Now, if a fire involved department leadership in any way, an outside agency had to review the case. The trust that once ran the system on its own now came with checks built to catch what trust alone had missed. For the victims, healing didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly, piece by piece. The family of 4 eventually moved back into their repaired home, though it took longer than they hoped. The months they spent away left a mark that didn't disappear just because the walls were fixed. The volunteer firefighter continued recovering from the smoke damage to his lungs. Doctors said full recovery could take years, and some effects might never fully go away. Still, he says he wants to keep helping his community, just in a way that feels right to him now. The retired teacher rebuilt her home on the same land where she had lived for 30 years. The walls were new. The furniture was new. But the photographs, the keepsakes, and the memories tied to them were gone for good. She says she's thankful to be alive, but some mornings, she still reaches for picture frames that aren't there anymore. As for Lucius Corbin, the man once seen as a symbol of safety in his community, his story leaves behind one simple truth. Lucius Corbin spent his life chasing the feeling of being needed and burned down everything he was trusted to protect to feel it one more time. If this story kept you watching until the end, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the next case is just as shocking and just as real.